Start recording.
Recording started.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Community's Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 556. My name is Eric Nelson. And with me today, I have my regular co-host, Corey Romero. Not so regular, actually. Today is Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. Corey Romero, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. The weather here in Utah has finally reached in the 80s for several days. Haven't had snow in over a week. Doing great. How are you, Eric?
I'm doing great. It is sunny, kind of windy today, sunny and windy in the Bay Area. So, and a little bit chilly. So we had some blustery wind last week, and this week it's continuing. So the Bay Area is dark green and choppy because we've got some wind and a little bit of chilliness here. On the show today, I'm excited because we have Michael Roy back. He is product line manager for Fusion Workstation and so forth. We're going to be talking about Fusion on M1, which I'm a big ARM kind of guy anyway. So I think this will be a fun podcast. Stay tuned. Mike, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
All right. Let's do some news. Again, we're still in the glow of Raghu Raghumaran being our CEO. Corey, I'm super excited about that, as is everybody here. VMworld call for papers. I think they closed last Friday, and I haven't heard they've extended it or not. I should go look that up during the podcast. But the call for papers went in.
They are closed.
They are closed. Thank you. Thank you for telling me that, Tony. So if you got them in, good. We will notify speakers on June 21. I know that V Brownbag is still doing call for tech talks. So if you want to do a PowerShell session or for VMware Code, or you want to do any kind of session, V Brownbag session, reach out to Alistair Cook on V Brownbag. You can Google him. He's got a call for papers up for VMworld. We're going to have a community booth going on live 24/7 at the show this year, so you can drop in, be in chat, engage with us. Alistair Cook's going to be live streaming every 30 minutes, so it's going to be very much like the community booth that we typically have at the conference. We're going to be doing that live all for 2 days, and so look for you go submit a paper. We're going to get those papers listed in Schedule Builder like we always do. And so if you missed call for papers for the main event, you can still do a V Brownbag paper, get that into Alistair. I think he's going to close up in late June. So we have maybe another 6 to 7 weeks to get that in order to make the Schedule Builder deadline. And let's see, of course, VMworld 2021, October 5th through the 7th. So I don't think Reg is open yet, but we'll let you know when it is. Corey Romero, what's new with the vExpert program?
Yeah, so vExpert 2021 second half applications are kicking off. So they're going to open June 7th and they're going to close July 9th. So a little bit over a month you'll have to go in and do your application. We're going to announce the results on August 13th. But something new that we've done for 2021 this year, and we just kicked them off last week. So you have the ability to go in as an applicant now to one of our Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups and speak with the vExpert Pro directly online and get feedback on your application before we even know it on the application. So you go to blogs.vmware.com/vExpert. You can read all about it. You can read about the Facebook groups, how to find the Facebook group, how to find the LinkedIn group, what it's for. Introduce yourself to the pros. The pros will introduce themselves to you. You can receive feedback on your application. They'll go over exactly what you need to do, what you might be missing, what you might need to change or add. And I'm really looking forward to it this year. And this is something, like I said, something brand new we've done. And I'm excited to see where we go with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to tell you, I've been doing a lot of blog work lately on the blogs.vmware.com, and we have the affiliate blog link, and spend a lot of time on people's blogs. And I know we've had a lot of bloggers in here on the show. Got to say, I'm super impressed with everything that everybody writes these days. The whole program has really helped people become really good bloggers and evangelists. So good job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, we need a soundtrack. So if you want, you can go check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/vbarbecue. You'll get to see Michael and what he looks like and his studio in the background, right? He run some music. We've talked to him about maybe remastering our opening jingle, and he said he's on board for that. So without further ado, we don't have any other news, so let's talk to Michael Rowe. Michael, we always do the 1 minute elevator pitch. Who are you? How long you been at VMware? Everybody should know this by now. What do you work on? And then we'll get into some Fusion Workstation stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me, guys. Much appreciated. It's always a pleasure spending lunchtime chatting with you folk. Yeah, Michael Roy, going on year 12 at VMware now, as of coming up in June here. I started actually running the Fusion and Workstation support team over in Burlington, Canada. So I'm a Canadian expat. I currently live just outside of San Francisco, where it's super windy. Like I live in like the wind corridor of the peninsula. It's, where it's windy in the bay, it's triple windy here. So yeah, I've been managing Fusion and Workstation since 2015. I did like technical marketing and stuff for vCloud Air before that. And before VMware, I ran like data centers. I did systems, Linux systems and stuff. So I'm an open source Linux kind of guy through and through. I've got my Kubernetes contributor hoodie on here, representing the crew. And yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Very, very nice. Yeah, I know we were just talking about the fact that Raghu, was named CEO, and I have an interesting story that I've mentioned that Raghu, he was a hiring manager when we came in, when I came to VMware from Sun Microsystems, and so I worked on his team, went to his staff meetings. I've loved him ever since he ran tech marketing back when I worked over in tech marketing. So, and I know you have a Raghu story as well.
Yeah, Raghu's good people. We've crossed paths a bunch of times over the years. When he started at VMware, he was one of the product managers for what was, what became Workstation at the time. It was just, VMware for Linux, I think, when he probably came in. But yeah, he's always had an ear open and eager to talk about all things on the desktop. His office has been open very pointedly. Like I can just, email him. He knows who I am if I tap him on the shoulder and whatnot. But he introduced me to Mendel and Michael from some of the original founders when we had our 20-year anniversary festivities thing on campus there a couple of years back, which was really nice. Just to the product managers for the product just sort of sharing war stories. It was really exciting. But he's got there's a place in his heart for Workstation and Fusion, and I think that's really great for the product group going forward.
Yeah. I have similar stories like that. Whenever you go into Raghu, I think when we were doing VMware code and trying to figure out DevOps and where does code sit and that, and we went and chatted with him in his office, and he's just like the most level-headed, step back, think about the problem. It's kind of like coaching, right? He doesn't tell you yes or no, right? And he certainly had the authority to do so at the time, but he doesn't tell you yes or no. He gives you things to think about, right? And then help you make a good decision, right? And just gives you smart thoughts. And I love that about him, right? Like he's just that kind of guy, right?
I think that's a very good characteristic for a good leader. I mean, it's not about, cutting the grass. It's about teaching everybody how to use the lawnmower, right? And trusting that they're going to do it on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pat was a super extrovert, great guy. But if you went to Pat and asked him something, he was going to coach you. He was going to give you an answer, right? Or at least a couple times I've engaged with him, he's just very much going to give you an answer, which is another style. I like it as well. I love Pat for that reason. I love that he's over in Intel. But I'm really super excited about, as a software company, having a software guy there that completely gets it. I'm excited. And he gets the cloud services, but he also understands data center. So yeah, really excited about that. All right, enough about him and enough about our history, having worked for him for such a long time here. So exciting news. We talk about, like, maybe we should talk about the industry and ARM. We're going to talk about Fusion on ARM. Do we just open with Fusion and ARM, or do we talk about ARM first? How do you want to approach it?
I mean, I'm good either way. Our announcements have already all been made, so there's nothing, no spoilers coming out today. So
then I'll talk about ARM first, right? Like, which is okay. So Mac is going to ARM, right? And obviously Raspberry Pi has been ARM, and iPhones have been ARM, and now, as we saw PowerPC shift to Intel back when Steve Jobs took over Apple, back then, now we're seeing them just go into iPhone ARM. What's your impression of ARM in general, and what do you think of this?
Well, I've been using Raspberry Pis for a couple of years. I did a Christmas project a couple of years ago, and I built an arcade machine for my nephew, and using an RPi 3,
Yeah.
and like all the emulators and whatnot, and it was a great project and easy to work with the family together, because I was getting to work on the Raspberry Pi and getting Linux installed and doing all that stuff, getting the games ready, and then my dad and my sister were like building the cabinet and doing all the finishing and stuff, because they're carpentry type, they work with their hands, so
Right.
it worked really great in that respect. So I mean, I got a lot of respect for the ability to take that power of a computer and shrink it into a thing the size of a credit card. It's incredible. ARM rules the world already. I mean, your iDevices, your Android devices, they've been there for a long time. But what's awesome is it's finally getting that like performance per watt ratio where it makes more sense to have them in desktops now than it did before. You could run forever on battery, but your performance, wasn't all that great up until a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden iPhones are surpassing desktops and Geekbench scores, and it's like, well, wait a minute, that's a huge game changer, and they can do it on all day battery life. So seeing Apple bring that to the desktop and seeing what they can do with an architecture like that they can add their innovation layers on top of, I think it's, if nothing else, it's a testament to what's possible with this type of chip. And I think, as much as I think it's awesome that Intel's got Pat, they've got some work ahead of them to try and compete in this space.
Yeah. Do we think that enough of the app vendors are going to then move over, like League of Legends from Riot Games, right? Only runs on Windows, PC, right? Like x86. It's an x86 app, right? Like I think they have it on Mac and PC, but it's x86. And one of the things to me that rescued Apple at the time when Steve Jobs took over is he did go to Intel, because there is such a huge, Intel following, right? Do we think there's enough momentum in cloud services and apps that they can make the ARM on the desktop compete against x86 application space?
I think it depends on the applications. Like, I don't think you're gonna see like folks porting Crysis over to ARM, for example.
Right.
Maybe give it some time, maybe going forward a little bit, but I think that right now, like desktop, the PC master race is Intel AMD with NVIDIA AMD GPUs, and
Right.
games are going to be optimized for that, because that same platform can be ported onto Xbox, PlayStation, not Wii, or whatever, and a Switch and whatnot. But it's portable, and that's sort of one of the benefits of it. Xbox, from what I understand, actually runs the thing in a hypervisor. The operating system. It's how it can do some of the maintenance stuff without it feeling like a computer. So I think that if you end up with things like Unreal Engine and
Unity and some other stuff.
Exactly. Thank you. Once they get to the ability where you can like write once and then just like change a compile flag and it'll make it for both platforms, if it's that easy for a developer to do it, then you'll see that happen. But until then, as long as there's like this huge hurdle to port everything over to the quirkiness that ARM has versus the quirkiness that Intel has, I don't think that you're going to see like mainstream AAA titles like games. That said, I definitely see that there will be a market there for a whole range of everything else. Productivity apps. I think that augmented reality is starting to come out a lot more. So you're seeing apps that like require some type of integration with a camera and lidar sensors and things like that. So, and you can't do that with like a laptop. You need to have a tablet form factor
Right.
to sort of make those things really worthwhile as far as a user experience go. So that's what I think the innovation is going to happen.
Yeah, and certainly from an Apple perspective, right? The fact that they got iPhone apps and they got the application store that's got a bazillion apps for iPhone, which is all ARM compiled. That being able to make that application base just automatically run on their desktop, without any translator emulators, really, they've got an advantage there, right? Because of the.
I think that there's a slight advantage there. It's not as, I would say that it's not quite as rosy a picture as it's painted right now. Like going through right now the exercise of building a Swift project, Swift UI, using the latest, greatest everything, trying to build a project that runs on, Mac OS and iPad, for example.
Right.
The same code doesn't do the same thing on both platforms. You have to accommodate either or, and you still end up sort of having to handle all of that. And so it's not quite there yet, but there's certainly a lot further now than they ever were. But I do also think that the paradigm of like running a random iOS app like on the Mac, it's pretty gimmicky from what I've been seeing. At first, it made big headlines, and a lot of folks like, "Oh, this is so cool!" But like, how often are you opening up Instagram on your Mac? right? Like it's just they're totally different use cases. The interfaces are designed to have that tactile responsiveness. So I think that where you're going to see the advantage going forward is being able to develop a single code base, single library set, and then have different UI implementations for the device that it's on.
One of the things that strikes me though is there could be an issue where kind of like Java, where they try to do too much, right?
It's like they have the concept. You're exactly right. They have the concept of write once, run anywhere, and I don't think that iOS and macOS and tvOS and all that is the same thing. It's all about there's shared libraries, but you really want to curate the experience, and that requires care. And
so this really just could be a margin play for Apple, right? Where because they own the M1 chip, or they're building the ARM chip themselves, or not they don't have their fab, but they architect it, that then they can just scale the chip, and they don't have to pay Intel a license of $100 per platform now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the licensing cost ends up. They still have to pay ARM for their licenses, right? Which I don't know what the difference in NVIDIA, but you're totally right that I think having the M1 chip in an iPad, in an iMac, in a MacBook, in a Mac Mini, in a MacBook Pro, the same chip, when you run all the benchmarks, they're basically the same. What I think Apple is saying is like needs and speeds are not things that most people should be concerned about. What you should care about is like, is this the right device for the use case that you're trying to solve for? And what's that experience end to end feel like? And if they have a single chip, then they know that they can control that experience very succinctly, and at the same time you get benefits of scale by stamping that same chip out into 8 devices instead of having 8 variants of the same chip in each device.
Tony Foster mentions that NVIDIA did buy ARM, so that also might help compatibility with NVIDIA.
The deal hasn't closed yet, but you're right.
Oh, that is true. I haven't followed whether they've closed that deal. All right, so that's kind of where the industry is, right? And now we come to VMware and ARM, right? So we'll spend a little time there. Most people, like you say, we've made these announcements. ESX on ARM, we've done that. Now we're doing Fusion on ARM. So take us through. Well, I guess before we do that, I assume you have an M1 laptop floating around somewhere. Have you used one of these guys? What's your impression of it?
I'm talking to you right now on one.
Oh, excellent! Right, so you're
I'm all in. I've updated most of my workflow. There's a few things that are still not entirely there, but most apps that I use are basically there. The holdouts were like things that are based on Electron, which Electron is like almost there, and they aren't things I could have gone without. Like GitHub Desktop, really enjoy having the UI and the sort of separation of like, here's my code changes and here's my commit status. Having those as 2 separate worlds is nice for me. So they only just released their beta version of the ARM M1 support just a couple weeks ago or something. So that's basically it. Other than, of course, virtualization, but I'm in a special category where I have that and other folks don't.
Right, you're getting there. So we announced Fusion on ARM. What's the roadmap? I haven't paid attention. Is it out? Is it in dev? Is it a fling? Well, what do we know?
So we've announced in like November that we were going to do this. We made the commitment to do it, and it's been a bit of a haul since then. It's a lot of work. It seems like it's something that would you just change the flag from x86 to ARM and it works. Or why don't you just use the Rosetta technology? Shouldn't your app just work? And it's not that easy. So like each component within the virtual stack, we have to update and support. And sometimes that's easy. And sometimes, things behave differently and we need to adjust. And so as we've been uncovering things, there are things that we don't know until we like uncover it. And then, this is a big nothing burger. And you uncover another thing. And it's like, this is 6 weeks of engineering work or something. So that's why we've been a little hesitant with timelines. So we came out in November and said, we're going to go ahead and do it. And then, the M devices came out. Parallels released a version of their desktop product that's got support for it within it, and we've been taking a look at that a little bit, mostly just to compare and to see how far along we are, because we came out and said we're going to be ready before the end of the year, and looking at our performance, I think we were very much underestimating how far along we actually were. I don't think it's going to be December when we get this thing out, but the intention is to issue a public tech preview, and then after that we'll have our a GA date at some point. Not really supposed to infer when that's going to happen.
You're not allowed to talk about that. Yeah, right. But do you think, in the grand scale, that saying it was this year was a long line? You expect it probably sooner than that.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, what we've typically done, the schedule that we try to keep to is in alignment with WWDC, which is Apple's developer conference, which happens in June, I think. And so they release a new version of the operating system. It's got some changes in it. We do some changes internally to try and accommodate that. And then we issue a tech preview. I'm hoping that we can keep that same cadence this year.
Nice. Yeah, that would be good. So you got it. Just talk a little bit about the M1 machine. Is it only on the low ends? Is it only on the 13-inch and the Air? What are they on it? What did they release?
Yeah, so you've got them on the MacBook Air, the old form factors of the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro 13-inch, and the Mac Mini. And then you've got the newly released iMac, which has the same chip in it, but it's got a whole new design. Looks great. Haven't seen the iMacs yet, but I don't think I will need to bother. It's the same M1 chip. I don't have to so much worry about having one of everything because we can expect them to sort of behave the same from a development perspective.
Yeah,
from a fast. I mean, the one thing I could take away is these things are they're stupid fast and they last all day on battery. Even me working with VMs and like really exercising, the internal builds of Fusion that we have to try and break it as much as I can. This thing just does not slow down. I mean, the screenshot that I put in the blog, I had 8 VMs running at the same time. Each VM had 4 cores, 8 gigs of RAM. This is an 8-core, 16 gig of RAM machine. And I was installing new operating systems while the other ones were running benchmarking tests, and they were all just going. It was just, I couldn't believe it. I thought something was broken. I'm like, did we, should I be running this many VMs? Is something going to crash? And it's been fantastic. So the holdouts right now are like tools. Because we ship tools through our Linux vendor partner programs, those need to be in place to have a great experience. So we need to ship upstream, get them into kernels, mainlined, get them shipped back down into app repositories so that they can be installed without having to build them from source. Right now, if you have like x86 ARM, you can pull the OpenVM tools, build it, and it'll just build. It just works. So that's been a blessing, but getting it into the distributions and getting it downstream is where a lot of the work's got to go.
That's some distributions that run in the VMs.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So like Ubuntu, Red Hat, Fedora, all those, right? They consume the open source packages that we deliver, which provide all the drivers and tools that you need for ESX and Fusion and Workstation, and they get baked into the operating systems themselves. So you can install it after the fact, and there's a delta of some features that are available that are proprietary that weren't available in the OpenVM tools. I don't think that there's a lot of delta there anymore, other than like I think it was like graphic driver. No, the something to do with the host guest file system sharing.
So Corey Romero, I know you're sitting here, and I'm thinking that these guys, the M1 from Apple are like $100 or $150 cheaper than their x86 counterpart, getting back to the license or whatever. Maybe it's just cheap, or Apple's just trying to go after market and they're giving you a discount on the machine. But I think that with an M1 Air, so the problem with the Apple Air is that it was pretty light from a CPU perspective. But let's assume that Michael's right, and the M1 chip is actually really high performance, like your iPhone. 8-core. The thing is a beast, right? My iPhone 11 is a beast. So assuming that, and you can pick one of these Airs up for like $800 or they're relatively cheap, the M1s. We could give a couple of these away at VMworld this year, right? To get people to come to the community booth, because when you get under, $900, it becomes in the realm of giving some of these things away, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be something cool. So, Michael, we're talking about tech preview, and I just had a question about: is there a way that you can fit in vExperts to help test some of this stuff? I don't know if you're having run any betas on this or what you're doing, but if we could fit vExperts into this somewhere, that would be fantastic.
I think that would be a great idea. Actually, I hadn't thought about that previously. I think what will be good is leveraging something that's maybe not quite ready for full public tech preview that the V experts might be okay with, like building tools from source, if that's okay, right?
Right.
I would expect V experts to be V and experts. So yeah, I think we can look into that. Absolutely.
Excellent. So yeah, we have a meeting next week, and we'll talk about that some more in that meeting.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, I like that. We've been looking at in my household, the M1s, right? Trying to think about whether we want to go down this road or not. And I kind of push back because I'm like, no, Pat's at Intel now. It's going to get better. Everything's going to be better. But if you look at the horsepower, what you're saying is, yeah, that's what I was also worried about is the M1 chip up to it, right? Like, will it run a full desktop? Yeah.
Yeah, I love my MacBook Air. Like I've wanted a MacBook Air for the longest time because I really like the form factor, but I've never been able to because I need the performance, right? Like my other machine is an 8-core i9. My machine beside me is an iMac Pro, like with 16 cores. Like I need those cores, but this thing hasn't slowed. It doesn't slow me down at any spot. It's stupid fast.
So okay,
the funny thing though is, like, I will just add too, it's so fast that users want to run all the x86 apps on it, and they want to have this really fast device that also runs their old school Windows app and whatnot. But the emulation on it is something that we're just not gonna look into doing. A lot of folks really wanted us to deliver x86 operating systems on the M device, and it's having been using them myself for a little bit, using emulation apps. Nobody wants this. This is a really awful experience. I could see where there's some benefit in things like cross-compiling architectures for like container images and things like that. But from a usability perspective, I mean, I don't know. I just want to run only ARM apps on this thing, and they run just so amazing. Why would you want to slow it down trying to run? It's like having a pickup truck being towed along by a semi.
that never worked when they were doing PowerPC to x86. If you lived in that space, they had emulators and they were just junk, right? Like it wasn't worth it. It's not worth it. You can make it work, right? But it just wasn't worth your time. Right?
Yeah, there's solutions out there that can scratch the niche for folks that have that itch, but from building a business perspective, yeah, it's hard to justify because it would be a huge amount of engineering effort to do x86. It would take us a year, maybe 2, to get it to the point where we're happy with it. And in 2 years, I mean, Apple devices there's not going to be any Intel ones left that Apple sells. So, I mean, what type of app?
That was one of my questions. So, has Apple announced when they're just going to end of life doing the x86? I know you can still buy the x86 machines, even the 13, but they're like $150 more than the M1s now. But they still have them. But have they announced when they're going to stop making them?
They said they would continue to support them for a few years. Which, if you sort of can read between the lines, what I would expect is all new devices are going to be M devices. The existing devices that are Intel based will continue to get Mac OS updates for a few more years, probably as long as an enterprise support agreement would be.
Right. Well, they're still selling. They're still selling the x86 machines as well, right? You could still buy them, right? But maybe to your point, they're not going to engineering any new machines. You can buy what they're already manufacturing, right? But they probably won't do any new versions of those machines with x86 CPUs. Maybe the 16-inch for another gen, but that's about it. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But it sounds like
I don't even think they'll do another 16-inch. I think the next MacBook Pro will be a heavily cored M device.
Interesting.
Yeah, they want to move forward. They don't want to move backwards. And they want to move forward at the expense of breaking backwards.
Right. Yeah. As Apple always does. Right. That's just what they do. Now the shelf life of machines turns out it's only like maybe 3 to 5 years, so it goes pretty quick.
I know about that. I mean, my MacBooks have always given me at least 7 years of life.
I run on my 13 because it's got a Photoshop license on it, and I don't want to have to upgrade to my 15 newer machine. And so and it's 2011, and I still every time I need to do Photoshop, I have it running. So
now that machines have solid states, everything has a solid state, whether it's a regular SSD or an M2 device or whatever. That's the bottleneck of most folks' speed. So. Devices are going to last a lot harder or a lot longer, and the hardware that Apple makes is top shelf, so it's not going to, you're not going to have the same like plastic wear that you have on older laptops where the wrists, groove in because you're on them so much.
I just Googled Photoshop on M1, and they have it, so it's out. So once I have that, now I have to go pay the license. I don't think I can go Pirate Bay, a hacked version of Photoshop for M1 yet. But give people time. I'm sure it'll be out there. But
Creative Cloud's a good deal.
Yeah, it is a good deal. Yeah. So yeah, if you get Photoshop and you have, browsers and Firefox and these guys, then you're pretty much in business. And clearly you're live streaming right now, no problems, right? And working good, which is interesting that even these HTML5 web services apparently are not architectural specific, right? They're able to handle it, right? No problems. Right?
The joys of the abstraction of a web browser.
Yeah. All right. So anything interesting in the M1 project you see from a technology perspective? Like, we haven't talked about new versions of Fusion, so we can step back from M1 a little bit and just go, so what's happening with Workstation Fusion? I know they track each other. What's happening? What excites you about the space in general?
Yeah, so, for folks that might not be aware, Workstation, Fusion, and ESX all share the same code. It's the same hypervisor code that runs in the data center, that runs on the desktop, and we ported it to Mac, and that's what Fusion is. And so what's great is, we've had to make some changes on the kernel side for Windows, particularly to support Hyper-V. And we did that through a project that we have called ULM, User Level Monitor. And what we did is we took the normal VMM process, the hypervisor process, and instead of running it in root via a bunch of kernel extensions, we run it in user space and call a bunch of APIs that are now provided by the operating system. So Windows has Windows Hypervisor Platform APIs baked into Windows, and Mac has a hypervisor framework as well, and Linux has a similar framework, or is looking at potentially doing a similar framework through KVM. So there's a lot of cross work that gets shared, right? So when we did the work to support Hyper-V on Windows, that work ended up being really important for Fusion because Fusion needed to adopt the similar model and talk to the operating system APIs. And that's particularly because of Big Sur. Apple kicked us and others out of the kernel, and now we need to do that. So that project is one that we're hoping will translate back into ESXi to really improve the performance, scalability, and security of the core hypervisor itself. But what's awesome is the people who are working on it are like the most core engineering individuals at VMware, that build the crux of the technology that satisfies and sustains our, multi-billion-dollar organization. Without, vSphere and ESX, everything, all the layers on top of it would fall apart, house of cards. Maybe less house of cards, but so what's great is A, that we can share that work, B, we have the most brilliant minds in the company working on it, and myself, I'm also on the Photon team, so we also have that running on Raspberry Pis and ARM and things like that. So there's a lot of work that we've done to support the Raspberry Pi and to support the ARM architecture that we were able to, like in the ESXi for ARM Fling, for example, a lot of folks who worked on that are working on our project here. So we're really grateful that we can sort of do that, and then we leave the productization aspect of things to a different team, to like what we call the UI teams, essentially. So it's been really great working with the platform team, and it's finding like really obscure low-level bugs, and when I would report an issue like, oh, this is doing this weird thing with like a clock timer, and you get into like the whys of it happening, and you're like suddenly you're in like monitor land, and you're having to figure out how instruction sets work and CPU registers and things. So it's certainly a beast of a challenge, but what's been, like I said, awesome is that we have the full support of the company on it. The engineering leadership is very much behind it, making sure we have all the resources we need, and getting to the point now where we've been trying to figure out what work do we actually need to do to satisfy a tech preview. Now we've got a lot better handle on that. So I'm super excited about the future.
does dawn on me. I wonder if Pat sits. I know he invested, $40 billion in Texas fabs, right? Trying to do more fabs, more fab capacity. And one of the things that's interesting about ARM, and I'll just get your perspective on this. Like, I wonder if Intel will consider making ARM chips for people.
They said something to the effect that they wouldn't be opposed to that. I can't remember what it was. Something to the effect of them saying we'd be more than happy to build Apple's chips for them if they can achieve the type of fab process that Taiwan Semiconductor can do and the type of scale they can do. Great, we need to do that. I think right now there's too many chips concentrated in too little areas of the world, and you need to distribute that if you want to have a healthy supply chain.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. And that would be very Gelsinger-like, right? Where, what he tended to do for VMware is any new technology that came along, and maybe this would agree, it was all of us, the brain trust, is we just give it a bear hug, right? And we go, fine, we'll take that on too. We have great software engineers. We think we can do that industry better than anybody else, and then we can bring our customers along. So I could see Intel trying to do that, right? Like, hey, we'll fab ARM chips as well. Order your ARM chips here. Somebody has to fab them, right? And yes, you compete against TMC. Is it TMC?
TSMC.
Taiwan Semiconductor. Yeah. I'm too busy watching League of Legends teams. Half of them are sponsored by the chip manufacturers, and I can't keep track of which one's which.
Yeah, I was just looking at some benchmarks. The i7 latest was a Gen 11 i7 versus the M1, and you can see where Intel kind of cherry picked some of the results. But if you look at the results, some of them vary from game to game, application to application. But I do think Apple or Intel does have to do something, and I think Pat would be the right person to do that. And kind of like you said, Eric, Pat always embraced change, right? No matter what it was, whether you saw it good or bad, he always seemed to turn it around where it benefited the users and the company, right? And I think Intel has to do something in that sense. Like you were talking about manufacturing those chips. Yeah, I would agree that that's something going to happen with Pat, especially with Pat over there. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think so too. Performance-wise, I mean, they got a lot of catching up to do. I mean, I'm doing some comparisons with my i9, like whatever 2020 MacBook Pro. I'll run a test in a VM, same VM, 4 gigs of RAM, or 4 CPU, 8 gigs of RAM, and I'll run a benchmarking test. And that same test I'll run on Fusion on my M device, and it's almost 10 times faster.
Wow.
Like 9.4-ish times faster on average. It's stupid fast.
Wow.
So one thing that's kind of maybe an elephant in the room here is that, Fusion cut its teeth on running Windows on Mac, right? And I know Windows does have an ARM release, but we also cut our teeth now on Kubernetes development environments and test environments and things like. So if Windows is not on ARM yet, Apple's moving to ARM. What say you the future of Fusion? Where are we going?
Well, Fusion's going to continue to survive. I think it's, if we stop doing Fusion, we stop doing Workstation too, and that's not tenable, right? We use Workstation to test vSphere. That's in our internal infrastructure. That's how it works because of the virtue of having the same platform. We use the same tools to test it all across the board. So that's that. But on the Windows side, the ball is entirely in Microsoft's court here. I think it's terrible that Parallels goes out and actively tells its users to break the Microsoft licensing, and that they themselves actually went out and broke the Microsoft licensing to develop their drivers and things like that. You cannot buy a copy of Windows for ARM right now. It comes on a Surface Book or a Lenovo or an HP device, and if you're an OEM partner, that's it. That's who can have it. The licensing very clearly states that you can't install it unless it's already. You can't even run the insider builds unless it's already on, unless you already have Windows installed on your physical device. There's no Macs that have that, so I think it's awful. I think Microsoft could very well turn around and say, "Hey, there's a market here," and offer a way to do that. We'd be very happy if they were to do that. We're ready to support the operating system if they up and roll with it. What it takes to boot Linux is not all that different than what it takes to boot Windows. Right. So I think we're ready to go there, but the ball's entirely in Microsoft's court. And again, I just think it's shameful that the competitors are like, go ahead, break all the rules. Who cares? It's like, you're a software company. Why would you tell someone to break software licenses?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So they treat Windows, the ARM version of Windows, as an appliance, right? Just comes with the hardware, and that's what you get. They don't sell it independently. You can't run it on anything besides their appliance that they're selling, and therefore, it's interesting. Who's the CEO over there? The guy. He seems pretty sharp.
Satya.
What's his name?
Satya Nadella.
Satya, yeah, that's it. It seems like Satya is pretty sharp, and the way he treated Linux, and now they got Unix built right into Windows, and the whole thing is there, and they've kind of embraced that. When he took over from, the last CEO, not Gates, but the next one after that, Ballmer, he kind of turned the ship and did a pretty good job. I like what they've done, so I would be really surprised if they don't open that up, because they embraced Unix and Linux that way. They gave it a bear hug, put Linux in Windows, and you got a full operating system that you can run and use, which was a shift because he did that.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like, I mean, Microsoft wants to protect its interests, extract shareholder value, etc. Taking a page out of Apple's playbook. The Apple doesn't let you run Mac OS on other hardware. There's a tight coupling between the hardware and the software, and I think that from a security perspective, this is a really important thing, particularly in the enterprise. If you're going to deploy a bunch of devices, there needs to be a level of attestation and trust throughout the device. Right. And if you don't have that tight coupling of the operating system and the hardware, then it's hard to ascertain that the device is allowed to do the thing that it's supposed to be doing. So when I look at virtual machines, to me, they're like developer tools. They aren't things that, all are as persistent as a desktop, for example. And at the same time, as a security, as a user of products that have a security implication, you want to make sure that everything that's inside of your device is legit, right? So like on my personal device, it's like, I know I trust Apple and I don't have to worry about it. Linux, I'm installing it myself. That's cool. Windows, I'm getting it from Microsoft. I don't have to worry about it, but it's this notion that, that the operating system isn't theirs, that it belongs to the community. Well, it's their operating system. They can choose to do with it whatever they want. And if they want to make a whole new class of devices and lock it down and do that, then that's their play. What I hope that happens is, for developers who want to get applications done, they turn to open source tools and they turn to Linux, and and you can see Microsoft doing the same thing. Windows Subsystem for Linux is an attempt to try and woo developers so that you don't have to do backflips of the workflow that you're used to just to get your application to start building in Windows environments. So I think that they want to woo developers, and they want to make sure that they're also protecting their bottom line.
That makes sense. So, topic, we're coming up to the last 12 minutes of the show here. COVID is almost done. I think California is opening up June 15th. What say, Michael Roy? Are you any plans to get out, talk to anybody? What's your entry back into the real world out of your happy studio land? Or are you just going to stay where you are? I'm not.
Yeah, there's a beach and a Mai Tai with my name on it somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, I booked a trip to Palm Springs. We're going to go to Palm Springs in June. Like right when things open back up, we're allowed to be everywhere. June 15th, I think it is. So I'm going to go there and then flip over to Arizona and just do some really nice warm outside weather. But I'm struggling with the idea of getting in a plane and going 500 miles an hour, because my max top speed for the last year has been like 5 miles an hour, right? Like 4 to 5 miles an hour is about all I can tolerate. And I'm just not sure that I can get back into that space. But I'm hoping so. And I guess we'll have to just see how things turn out. Are you looking forward to going back to the real world? I'm not sure even VMworld, this whole thing, like getting back in front of people, I don't know. I'm going to have to go get some medical help, a shrink or something, talk me through how to turn my brain back onto being outside of my home.
Yeah, it's going to be an adjustment. Like we have a running calendar downstairs, and we're on like day 430 something or other, I think. And we've all adjusted, and there is new normal. It'll be great, I think, when we don't have to be as afraid just to go out and do our normal things and live our normal life. Like I got my second shot last week. I'm just, I got another week left, and then, fully vaccinated and and then still I'm still going to wear a mask every, if I need to. And that's just the nature of the game. But I do look forward to, VMworld. I love VMworld. I hope that we get to go to Barcelona again.
I guess.
The last thing I did before the COVID lockdown happened was I was in Vegas for Valentine's Day. I can't wait to go back. I've never liked going to Vegas, but now I'm just like, please get me in front of those super cheesy slot machines in the old Vegas, and it'll be great.
That's funny.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think we all will ease back in. So it's kind of this thing. 4 months ago, if you asked me, I was like super excited. Oh, I can't wait, man. This is going to be great. We're going to come out of this. We're going to get back to real life. And now that it's here, I'm like, you want me to jump in the pool? Oh, let me feel it's cold. I don't know if I like. And I know once I get in, it'll be great, and we'll all get to do this again. And I have a feeling it'll snap back to normal, and you'll just get back to used to. I went to Home Depot the other day, and I just had a mask. I didn't worry about dying. I was happy, and I bought some stuff, and I did some projects, and it felt like almost normal again. So yes, I wore a mask, but that's about it. Otherwise, I wasn't worried about dying any longer. Right. So, so that's
there. The only challenge I have is I would love to have gone back home to visit my family in Canada, but Ontario right now is having a hard time with the COVID.
Shout out to everybody in Asia, in India, where everybody's just still going through it. There will be light at the end of the tunnel, but all the countries are just in different moments of getting through the pandemic. So,
talking with a colleague this morning, and he's over there, and I hadn't heard from him in a couple of weeks. I was like, "Everything all right?" He's like, "Oh, I have COVID. Sorry, I've been out of commission for weeks. I'm better now," and he's good now, but. It's just
a lot of people are getting through it, and a lot of people. Have you had your second shot? A lot of people have had heavier reactions, especially with Moderna. I've heard like the Pfizer. A lot of guys I know that didn't have a hard time, just sore arms. But Moderna, I have some friends that got sick for like 4 or 5 days. Were like pretty sick.
I felt bad too. Like I didn't think about it at the time, and now I wish I would have said things a little differently, but when I was out for a couple of days, I had an out of office, and then someone in Japan needed something, and they emailed me, and a couple of days went by, and I replied back to them, "Hey, sorry, I was out of commission. I had just got my COVID shot." And they replied back, "Oh, it must be nice. Like we're not getting ours until sometime next year." I was like, "Oh, geez." You forget how privileged we are in the Bay Area and in America. There's so many places around the world that they want the vaccine. They just the availability is not quite there.
Yeah. And it is true, as we would bring this podcast to reality here a little bit. Like, I had never really felt privileged, and the privilege movement I always kind of scoffed at because my dad was a roofer. I had a roof half my childhood, so like it was a hard life. And roofing in Florida, it's like 102 degrees. If you picked up a tool on the roof, it'd burn your hand. Your hand got super callous. So there was no privilege in my life growing up. And I eventually went to college and did computer science, right? So it was like I clawed my way out of, which was a pretty tough way to earn a living, right? So I don't call it. When I got my COVID shots, I literally drove home thinking, wow, I'm privileged. This was really Western world. You were one of the first set of people that were able to get a shot. And the relief you feel when you do get the shot, is pretty.
And you got the good one too. Like if you got Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, like those are the good ones. There's a bunch of other ones out there that are way less effective.
Right. Yeah. And so I do feel, and I do feel privileged, and it makes me want to do a bit more charity work and a bit more international awareness of, how to bring international places up to first world status so that, so that we're more of an equal world, because I finally felt privileged, right, and felt bad about being privileged.
Well, it's nice that at least we have the tools that we can have the conversation now, whereas at least that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago, at least.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Well, we got 5 minutes left. Any other things, Michael? We're going to talk barbecue in one more minute. Anything else that you want to leave the community? Do you need the community to do anything for you? I know you'll talk to Corey about VExperts and how they could help out. Any other things that community members can do?
Yeah. just sit tight, be patient. There's one thing I know for sure is, Big Sur Fusion has NAT problems. I know. Everybody tells me it's supposed to. I know. We have a fix internally. We're going to get that out hopefully in the next release. Top priority. The issue is if you install VPN on the host instead of a Mac guest or instead of a virtual machine on the Mac, it doesn't work because of Apple's API changes. So we fixed it. We've got an internal working. We're testing. It's coming out. The other one is.
I upgraded one of my machines to Big Sur, and none of my dongles work. Right, or they work, or they stop, or monitors flash. Like, there's a lot of issues with Big Sur. I went on the boards, and they got a bunch of stuff that they're working on, and they're like, yeah, we're working on fixes. So there are a lot. Big Sur with the security model changes seem to have broken a lot of things. Right. So
yeah, and it's tough because you rely on APIs that you're given by the hardware and the operating system vendor, and then they don't behave the way that you need them to behave. And so it's a year of waiting for those things to get updated, the next major release of the operating system, and putting in workarounds in the meantime, and all that fun
if
stuff.
you haven't upgraded to Big Sur yet, I would whoa, don't. But the problem is, you buy a new machine, you're going to get Big Sur from Apple, right? And VMware is upgrading everybody. So your IT org can decide when you're going to upgrade, and you get to upgrade whether you like it or not.
Yeah, my daily driver on my Intel thing is a Mac Mini with Catalina.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right, just stay tuned, and we'll go get the tech preview out. And thanks, Corey, for the invitation to the experts.
Perfect.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Talk next week.
Tony Foster, V Barbecue. For everybody, thank you for listening to the end. Tony Foster, you mentioned something about barbecuing last weekend. What was the deal?
So last weekend was National Barbecue Week. So, or National Barbecue Day, I'm sorry. It's National Barbecue Month as well, interestingly enough. But yes, I celebrated National Barbecue Day by barbecuing steak.
Always good to go steak. That's right. Well, I got a cornfield report. My cornfield is coming in. I've got 7 rows of 16 corn in each row. So I don't know, 7 times 16 is whatever that is. So I should get a couple hundred ears of corn coming out, and they're now 1.5 feet tall. So in lieu of that, I did barbecue some corn, went and bought some corn and threw it on the barbecue. You can never go wrong with just barbecuing corn. It takes about 10 minutes. You just rotate it till you gets a little charcoal brown, light brown, black, depends on how you like it. Pretty good. You can never go wrong with some barbecued corn with on the grill with Kings for charcoal.
Growing up, I was in a rural area in all cornfields. Big fan of the barbecue corn.
I love barbecued corn. Eric, you taught me years ago on how to barbecue corn with leaving the outside leaves on, right? You tear them down and you can barely just see the husk until you can barely just see the corn, and then you put that on, and once the husk turns black, that's when it's ready to come off. And then what you do is you literally just cut the end off, and then you just pull the husk right off the corn, and it's just ready for butter. But I just got back from Arkansas, and I've got a friend out there who's got a 250-acre ranch, and he's got cattle and everything else. Sent me home with a huge cooler full of beef from his cattle ranch. So I'm excited to barbecue some of that this weekend, next week.
Nothing beats fresh anything, whether it's fresh corn or fresh cow or whatever. It's always good to get the fresh. Right. Sure. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Thanks for listening. Again, go over to youtube.com/vbarbecue. Give us a like and a follow if you want to. We always are into getting a few more of those every show. And we'll be back again next week. Michael Roy, thanks a lot for being here. Everybody have a great week and go get some barbecue for National Barbecue Month. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.